Well, welcome back to Podcast Tips with Rob Greenlee. We are live again. I am back from PodFest, which I was at down in Orlando. I want to welcome you to the show. This is episode 13 of this program, and I hope it's a lucky 13. And hope that you stay with us and ask lots of questions today. We have a terrific guest coming up, but get ready to learn some of the magic behind creating awesome podcasting content, and hopefully podcast content that's unforgettable, not unforgivable, but unforgettable. And we'll be diving into the world of creating, some different and unique content and some cool distribution strategies that'll make your podcast and audio visual experience a masterpiece. And I'm going to share next a little bit of a podcast tip, and I am not endorsed by any or sponsored by any microphone manufacturer, but what I wanted to just share with you was a couple of microphones that I have grown up with in my podcasting career. One of them obviously is the Shure SM7B, which is the one I'm using right here. But I would say that's a pretty advanced microphone, but it certainly is a good microphone. I would say it's probably the most popular microphone in the podcasting space today, with with larger shows that have probably a significant budget. To get one of these set up for your setup can be upwards of probably $700 or $800 to get it properly set up in your system. So, you might want to work your way up to actually getting a microphone like this. And I have a few microphones that would be terrific that you could use in your videos as well. I'm a big fan, as you might imagine, with the boom arm, and be able to not have to worry about the microphone and be able to move it around too. So one of the microphones that I want to share is the Audio-Technica ATR 2100X. And I'm going to pull that up on the screen so you can see that and have that. My guest popped up there. So let me, I haven't brought him on this. Oh boy. Okay. Let's see here. How can I, okay. Jack, you're on the screen with me. So that's all right. No, you can stay there. It's okay. It's no big deal. Go ahead and turn your camera on. It's fine. But I wanted to talk about the ATR 2100 microphone. I don't know if you can see on the screen, but it's a pretty inexpensive microphone. I actually have one of these here that you can see right here, and they're usually around $79. But what the great thing about these microphones is that you can turn them off and on. There's a little on-off switch here, and also they support XLR. So I don't know if you can see the back or the underside of this microphone, but it's got an XLR capable and then a USB capable plug-in. So it's a great way to kind of move up the ranks, as they say. So if you want to start out just utilizing USB, you can do that with this. And it's really easy to plug into your laptop or any kind of a computer. And then over time, maybe you want to eventually get a mixer or something like that. Then this microphone will also work with a regular mixer with an XLR jack in it. So this is a great microphone. I would highly recommend that you put this on a boom microphone or a boom stand, for your microphone, kind of like this. And that will help alleviate any kind of handheld mic kind of noise, because some people like to hold the mic like this and talk into it and move their fingers around and that kind of stuff. And that can transfer the sound a little bit to this particular microphone. So it's good to get up close on this microphone too. It does come with a pop filter. It's like a foam cover, kind of like what I have here on the Shure mic. The other mic I wanted to share is it's called the Samsung Q2U microphone. And I'm going to pull it up on the screen here and you can see it. And this microphone, it's actually very similar to the ATR, and it's as you can see, it's very close in price to the ATR, and it's very similar in its design and how it works. It's got XLR as well as a USB, so it's really kind of a personal preference kind of thing. Both of them will perform about the same. The advantage of this one is that it's better for handheld usage because it has a metal handle versus the ATR's kind of like a plastic, so it transfers noise a little bit. So those are a couple mics that I wanted to recommend. And then the last one I wanted to share, before I start talking about wireless mics, which is, let me share the Shure MV7, which is this microphone, which I happen to have one right here. And what's common amongst all these microphones that I'm sharing with you is their support for XLR and USB. So you have the ability to use it with, like I said, like a laptop or even a tablet, and be able to get the audio in there. But if you want to upgrade to a mixer or a Rodecaster or something like that, you can do that. So it's actually really, really compelling option. The last one I wanted to share with you, and then we're going to move on and pull Jack into the conversation here because he's got a lot to share with us, is a newer microphone that I've been playing around with. It's made by a company called DJI, and they're actually known for making drones. So I don't know if you're familiar with this mic setup. So let me make sure it's activated. But it actually has a receiver unit that comes in, and it's basically a wireless microphone setup that can plug into your iPhone. So you plug this into the back of your iPhone, and you like this, and it basically attaches to your iPhone like this, and then you take these little lavalier mics and you mic up yourself, and you mic up, let's say, a guest, and you can record right into your iPhone or your iPad. You can also do this with a USB-C port as well. So if you have like a laptop that has a USB-C port, you can also use this. Each of these little lavaliers actually stores audio in it too. So if you happen to get out of range of the receiver, it'll still record the audio. And all you do is take this little microphone, plug it into your laptop, and transfer the audio off of it. So it's really kind of versatile. It's a little on the, I didn't pull it up on the screen there. I probably should have done that. So let me pull that up here so you can see what that looks like. This is it here. It's a little bit more expensive. It's about $349 for the latest version of this, but it's a terrific solution if you're trying to do remote type of recordings, and ones that on your mobile phone. So it's really kind of compelling. The actual base unit itself has a built-in battery in it that will recharge the receiver as well as each of the lavaliers. So you can take this out and not have to worry about running out of battery. So anyway, I just wanted to share those. I hadn't really talked about equipment on this show too much yet. We've been really focused on the actual content part a lot on this program, but I just wanted to share some of the equipment that I use and I've been using for years with creating podcasts and doing things on a remote basis. So the last thing I wanted to share with you too is I used to work for Microsoft, just so you out there has a better understanding of who I am and what my background is. But I used to work on what's called the Microsoft Zune HD or the Zune platform, which originally started back in 2007 as part of an initiative at Microsoft that later got merged in with Xbox. But they made a portable media player that was competing with the iPod in the early days of podcasting. And so I was in charge of all the content and the podcast area. And this is a Zune HD right here. So it was a competitor to the iPod back in the day, and it had a fairly large screen that would actually play video. So you can see on the screen here, those are video podcasts that are listed in there that are stored, have been on that device for many, many years. And on the back of the device, this was one of the last Zune HDs ever made. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but it has a tombstone on it because it was the last one or the last batch of Zune HDs that they ever made. So the team that was still standing at the end of all their layoffs back in that time frame, if you this was kind of when Zune HD kind of went out of run and out of the market, was around 2011 or so. And that was a tough economic time. So Microsoft was laying off a lot of people. And so there wasn't a lot of Zune people left. But I left the Zune team about 2014, but I'd been absorbed into Xbox at that time. So I was the only non-music guy on the music team, of all things. So I was in charge of the podcast area. But anyway, I just wanted to share that, and it's a little history lesson into the kind of span of the podcasting era. And this platform, the Zune HD and the Zune platform, had its own like iTunes type of software, and it basically was the second largest consumption platform for podcasting until about I would say probably 2013, probably 2012, and that was just a little bit before Spotify decided that they were going to get into podcasting, and then they took that second place spot away from Microsoft. And there's a lot of people that'll be surprised to hear that. So anyway, that's a little bit of my history lesson here. So let's back out of this and get into the full side of the show here. And we can pull up our terrific guest here. I'm going to pull him up on the screen, and we can get into it and talk a little bit more. Please welcome Jack Levy. He's an acclaimed podcast executive producer at a company called Manifest Media, and has worked extensively with iHeartMedia, and is an Emmy Award-winning podcast producer. He's been nominated about 30 times. And Jack's current podcast is the Lower Bottoms podcast for iHeart, and is working with Kelsey Grammer and Debbie Allen on this production. I guess they're in streaming season 2 with this. So Jack, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with me.
Thank you, Rob. Hey, I have a few questions about your mic selections and one suggestion. I don't know if it's weirded, but the little portable system, was it the DIJ system or the DJI system?
Yeah, it's the DJI. Right.
Yeah, how many? Do you know if you can use multiple systems concurrent? Let's say I'm shooting a little project and I have 4 people who need a lav mic. Right. If I have 2 phones, is there any interference using 2 systems? And if not, I wonder how many systems you can stack in order to get multi-channel recording.
From what I understand about the technology, they have multiple channels that they utilize, because all of these wireless platforms realize that there's a lot of network interference, right? So they have to utilize and be able to quickly switch between channels. So it shouldn't be a problem. So my guess is they probably utilize up to 5 different channels or wireless frequencies to communicate with each of these devices, so they don't have that overlap. So yeah, I would imagine that you could. Yes.
Okay. Excellent. I mean, that makes it much more usable for, all kinds of media projects within podcast and even in independent filmmaking and, social media video and all that kind of stuff. The other thing I want to add about microphones is, I know microphones. I love microphones. I collect microphones. I think a lot of people in podcasts say, what microphone should I get? And, the real thing, I think, is what is your application, not what microphone should I get? So when you were talking about mics, when it says a dynamic mic or a condenser mic, I think that's nonsense to most of the people who are buying microphones.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. If you have a boundary mic, what's called a boundary mic, that means you're going to get the whole room, like what you want in a boardroom or something. So if you have a lot of people around a table and you can only have one microphone, maybe you're looking for a boundary mic, right? Because that's going to pick up everybody. And then when you talk about, condenser mics and dynamic mics, it's like a laser beam versus a floodlight.
Right. Yeah.
Totally. So it goes from that boundary mic, which is everything, which is 360. To your, condenser mic, to your dynamic mic, to your, shotgun mic, which is very particular. So I think it's not just, what microphone is the best. That's like how long is a rope, but you think of your application and then you try to choose the right microphone, I think. But, great content is not incumbent on the microphone. You can put you put a great musician on a Pawn Store instrument, and they'll sound great.
Yeah, and I think that the technology is getting a lot better now too. I know that you've been playing around with this new Nomano platform, and
Oh, listen,
we're
I love their
yeah,
stuff. I love their stuff. It's funny. There's a lot of platforms that make it very easy to listen. We make it so easy to produce a podcast. All you need to do is push one button, you produce. But the real question is, and there's platforms that do it. There's things like Nomano that do it. But that's like a program that says it will teach you to play guitar in 3 easy steps. It doesn't mean that you're going to be a virtuoso. And the misnomer is, oh, it's so easy, I can do it too. And it puts little value on the actual content, or what value you're bringing your audience, or what emotional response you bring from your audience, because that's really where your show thrives. It's not so much on, but yeah, the Nomano stuff is great. If you're a storyteller and you want to go in the field, there is nothing like it at its price point. You need a location sound crew to do what it does effortlessly, and it hasn't failed me yet. I keep expecting it to, because I'm such a snob. But not only is it a killer piece of gear, and listen, I am not paid to endorse it like this at all. But not only is it a killer piece of gear, but it sounds fantastic. It hasn't failed me yet. It's everything you wish you had. It's a location sound crew who never stops paying attention.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've got one here myself. The Nomano platform is out of Norway, right? Yeah, so we both have them.
Yes. Well, they're going to get mad at me because I got flamed by one of their people for showing that unit, because that was a beta unit. I have other ones that are the proper unit, but I'm kind of partial to this, like my favorite handbag. So.
Yeah, I think it's got that shiny surface. Yeah, mine's got kind of like a matte gray look to it, so it's not as cool looking as yours.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's kind of a conversation about trying to match the recording technology you have for the type of project that you're trying to do, and I think that's where we are in podcasting to some degree, as we think about the type of productions that you're doing may benefit from having different kinds of recording capabilities, but certainly the more traditional microphones and things like that, I'm sure you're pretty dependent on the high-end mics and stuff like that, just like everybody else is still.
Listen, and absolutely, and the mic that you're speaking into right now, you will find at Universal, and you will find at Warner Brothers, and you will find in every major recording studio, and you will find in every radio room. So it's a very respectable, dependable mic that, regardless of your voice, it's going to give you a lot of what you're looking for. So, that's a tried and true favorite. I'm really fortunate. I use some very high-end mics. What did they use? What did they use to record that? I've used on my narrators the same setup Frank Sinatra always used, and I've used the same mics that Whitney Houston liked to sing into, and I try to shoot some of my shows more like a jazz record than I would a traditional podcast. I think each voice is an instrument, and I want to see what kind of quality we can bring to the medium, because I'm doing something. I like fiction podcast. I've always been a fiction storyteller. Right. And so, it's different than, if you're doing a solo cast, or, a show where you're talking about information or delivering, some daily advice, or, whatever you're doing. I think that's different than being a fiction storyteller. And I saw such an opportunity there. But, again, as you said, the mic demand is a little different, and I try to do it. For me, it's like a Quincy Jones record and a Tarantino film and a podcast. And that's what I try to kind of deliver to the ears. But, it's a different audience too.
Yeah. And I've seen very successful podcasts, start out and build huge audiences with a microphone like this. So
listen,
it's $69, right?
100%. Listen, the story you have to tell has nothing to do with the quality microphone.
Right.
And if you're a compelling storyteller, like Stephen King said, story is a jalopy that runs versus a Ferrari that doesn't. If you have a good story, your audience is going to go with you. Right. So, if you're telling a good story, your audience is going to go with you. If you're adding value, if you're answering questions, if you're connecting emotionally, and that can be negative or positive. Some people hate that guy. We hate him. He's such a, and still tune in every week. So, and flame. But, you want to connect emotionally, or you want to offer some value.
Yeah. And I want to also say too that quality does matter. I think that there is a higher level of expectation now on the part of listeners that your audio does sound listenable. It's not painful to listen to,
Yeah.
which
And
is
listen,
which is my
100%.
base bar.
Yeah, listen, you win a marathon by milliseconds, not by miles, right?
Yep.
So when you get into that top 1% of shows, and by the way, some people don't want to be, they want to have a show and they want to have fun and they want it to be out there and they want to, enjoy the community, and that's one thing, and you can totally do that. And and again, I think I have a lot of advice for how people can do that more successfully. But if you say, hey, I really want to compete at the highest levels,
Yeah.
it is those little differences in quality and those little differences in performance that are going to make the difference between you being, an award nominee and an award winner. It's going to be those little differences that make the difference. The gift wrap, not the present inside.
So when you do, I don't know that you do a lot of live video, but what's your philosophy on audio when it comes to live like this? I mean, what kind of a microphone setup are you using right now? Are you using like a Mac type of mic setup?
Well, listen. I mean, right now, it's funny. It's almost like a home surround system, right? Some people
Got it.
get all crazy about their home surround system, and I spent $10,000 or $40,000 on my home surround system. Meanwhile, the room isn't an acoustic room, right? So you might as well have air conditioning and open windows. So, I think about what can I have at home, because I've come up in the finest recording studios, and we're one of my first gigs with A&M Records with Herb Alpert and then Don Henley in Studio A. And so those were the environments I was in. And so, I think for the purposes of this, I have better mics here. I have some very fine mics I'm looking at within my proximity, but, I think this is good enough for the conversation, but,
No, I agree with you. I mean, it gets back to what's the content, and I don't think that the audio when it comes to a show like this one is critical. Now, I am going to put this show out as a podcast. I mean, at some point as an audio only experience, but it's just a matter of thinking about video. Do we think that the visual experience of video is somewhat more important than the audio experience? Do you think?
I think it depends on the story you're telling, right?
Right.
Some people want a bedtime story and they close their eyes and they listen to a story. They want a horror story around a campfire, and that's more of an immersive experience in your mind, right? And so if you're going to have a podcast like that, you can go audio podcast, and that's a great way to go and connect with an audience who's looking for that experience. Some people want to see what you're doing. I have a cooking podcast. Well, I want to see what you're doing, and I want to see how it's made, and how do you scramble those eggs, and when do I put them in, right? Or, or anything, it doesn't even matter if it's voyeuristic, like, Howard Stern or Drink Champs or whatever. You want to see what's going on. And listen, I love tiny desk concerts because, you get a great show and it sounds great, but then you want to go and see that performance. So, even though they have, ridiculous downloads, their YouTube channel has, 50 million views, 50 million on, 50 million on a piece of content, because
That's
people
awesome.
want to see that. So I think it really depends on your program. But I think even if you have an audio only podcast, there are still moments on the stage during production, blah, 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 that you could have on a YouTube channel to have a further echo in video. Because, I think here's where you're going to thrive in podcast, really. Anyone who thinks I'm going to have a show and it's going to be big and I'm going to get money from YouTube, that's not it. Or I'm going to have a show and I'm going to have lots of downloads and I'm going to get $30 CPM and I'm going to make money. It's just not how it works. You have to make money 360 on your show. So you want to think, how can I have video and add value there? How can I have merchandising and add value there? How can I have an event and connect with my audience and add value there? And, your community will help you monetize a little bit, all the way around. But I think video is a huge component. People want to see anything that sounds like it's interesting. That's why, and I hate to endorse, I don't hate to endorse it, because, it doesn't really matter if you love it or hate it. It's a great example. A lot of things went on in Howard Stern that people wanted to see, before there was this innovation that we're working with now. And I think you have the exact same thing with, video and podcast. I think there's moments that people can listen to and moments people want to see, but I think no matter what, there should always be a video component.
Yeah, and I think that's the consensus of the industry that we're starting to see now, is that people are really starting to accept what the listeners and the viewers are telling us in research. And this is actually coming out. I think that the podcasting industry, has been really defaulted towards thinking of the medium primarily as an audio only medium. And I think that isn't historically accurate. A lot of people don't realize that the early days of podcasting was about 30 or 40% video. which may be surprising in the context of data speeds and the ubiquity of internet access back in those days. But it was there were whole media companies that started that were just doing video podcasts, and a couple of them are still around. Like How Stuff Works was a video podcast platform when it started. And it got acquired by Discovery and then iHeartRadio, and then it started to do more audio and as well as on the video side. I think maybe they faded away on the video side because of iHeart's interest as being an audio, primarily audio platform. But
they're still Clear Channel at their heart. They're still,
Oh yeah, totally.
As far as, in my opinion, I don't mean to offend anyone at iHeart who's, because I know many of you, but they operate like a radio station. They still do, I think.
Oh yeah, well that's in their DNA. That's what you would expect from them. Yeah, I remember working with them a little bit back when they still had that Clear Channel name, and I've also worked pretty closely with them since they moved into podcasting too. And I would say that of all the radio networks, they've probably embraced podcasting at a deeper level than just about everybody, except maybe Sirius XM. But I don't know that I would classify Sirius XM as really a broadcast radio.
Listen, I think they're deeply invested in it like a collector. Not like an investor. So they're invested in collecting as much IP as they can. But unlike the investor who's looking for maximum output, even from his smallest investment, they're interested in collecting that, but really only interested in focusing on their largest investments. And look, I love I love Will Ferrell and Charlemagne the God and everyone else who they have, who everyone can objectively argue is fantastic. But, they pay little attention to the stuffed animals they don't play with, which is fine. Just fine. This is an interesting
right. Yeah. Well, hey, before we keep going and diving into kind of more details around the content side, is where I'd love to go with this conversation. Is I wanted to mention everybody, and many people already know this about the show because they've been here before, but I do have a giveaway at the end of the program today, and I'm going to be giving away a StreamYard sweatshirt hoodie. This is it here, and as well as a Puddles duck that you can put behind you on your background if you want to, or you can give it to your dog. It's up to you. So anyway, just enter into the comment field of your chosen social platform and enter the hashtag #TheYard. And I can probably show you that right on the screen here. Someone actually did it before I even asked. It's pretty awesome, right? So that's usually right toward the end. We will pull up a screen. StreamYard has built a little tool that we can use to gather those entries. And I'm going to go in right now and I'm going to activate it. And so it will definitely collect all those comments. I think we're up to like 24 comments, or not comments, but posts of the yard. And so keep them coming. So if you haven't done it yet, just enter hashtag #TheYard, and that will qualify you to get into the giveaway. And I will push the button and we will throw some confetti and find out who is the winner this week. So anyway, Jack, I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of your work. I know that you have an announcement that you made over the last couple of days, a partnership with Realm, and that's a large podcast studio and fastest growing independent podcast network. But your background really is around podcast production, sound design, what's called media finishing, which I'm not exactly sure what that term means. So you might want to clarify that. And voice talent, direction, kind of coaching creative teams, and story threads, and budgeting. But I'm not sure how much of that applies to this audience. But it's certainly something that's.
First of all of it applies. So all I've done, I came from film and TV. I started, I guess with, people like certain credits in my resume. So, I did animation, I did Captain Planet, right? And then I got into film and I did Army of Darkness for Sam Raimi, which was great. And so I did the sound design and the sound finishing and the audio, because I've always been in recording studios and I've always recorded, and I've always worked on, for teams that were very demanding. I did Battlestar Galactica for Universal. I did Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for Marvel. I did Outlander. I did, it was Suits and many other, Gossip Girl, many other projects. And always with people who were very demanding about their sound. So I was very interested when I saw, podcast on the rise, having been in traditional media. I mean, I started in music, Warner Brothers and Motown and Capitol. And so I was always in studios recording stuff. And then lateral from me, I see podcasting on the rise, right? And it's interesting because even if you're working on a film, and the directors are always great and the studio is always great, you're a creative partner, but sound is always secondary to film, even though Spielberg says it's half the picture. And in podcast, you could really shine. You could really, you're almost the record producer or director in podcast. So as it was coming up, I saw it as a great medium for storytelling. And it didn't matter if it was documentary. I worked on Food Inc., which was Oscar nominated, or fiction, storytelling. So I got into it having always produced sound, and listening to podcasts, I thought they could be better audio storytellers. They were fine storytellers, but I thought there was an opportunity there. But you mentioned Lower Bottoms. I helped set up Universal's podcast division, and then I consulted for some people, and I sold Lower Bottoms to Will Packer and iHeart, which was great. And we had Theo Rossi from Sons of Anarchy and Amber Riley from Glee, who was great. But now, after those experiences, a partner of mine, Mark Nell, and I, started producing shows, and our first one is Table Read. And we take a room full of Hollywood actors and a script who's written by someone you are familiar with. It doesn't matter if it's the guy who created Vampire Diaries or, Fred Armisen from Saturday Night Live and Ty Burrell came to us with the script. But we do a live reading around a table, just like they do behind the scenes in Hollywood, to see if they like a script, but we make a podcast out of it. And we've been on the charts for 41 weeks with that. But I think the reason is, in fiction podcasts, why hasn't it gotten over? And I think the audience isn't included in the experience. And in our show, almost like Saturday Night Live, when they screw up, you're part of it. We bring a live reading to the table, and the audience feels like they're there. So they're listening to professionals doing their best, but when it falls apart, they're part of it. We break the fourth wall, and they hear everyone talking about, okay, let's pick it up back up here. And they're part of the laughs, they're part of the mistakes, they're part of the experience. Well, that's very kind of you. Who's that guy? Oh my God, it's my father. So that's what we do. And I think, to fiction, we brought something fresh. It's an anthology show by the greatest storytellers. Like, even when, our content is not from anonymous content or someone who's been on People magazine, it's from an award-winning writer who's won all these awards and hasn't had a shot. And so we bring those stories to life too. And it's been going really well. And now we have a project called Failure, which is on the Society and Culture charts. I think we're in the 50s right now, and it was just written up in Variety. It's called Failure with Ryan Kavanaugh. Ryan was is a credible producer in Hollywood, but he has a sordid past. Half of Hollywood loves him and half of Hollywood hates him. So it's true. He has a show called Failure, where he, talks to some real icons, not about their highest moments, but about their deepest failures. First one is Nigel Lithgow, who was our very first guest, who created American Idol. And So You Think You Can Dance, but has such an accomplished history before he ever got to that point. But, he tried to commit suicide at one point in his life, and he's been on his deathbed at another point in his life. And, he's been accused of things that are in the media now. And so he's talked about, even though everyone knows his successes, how he's handled these failures. And every guest that we have on, we have Bryce Hall coming up, who has 33 million TikTok followers, something ridiculous like that. And, he talks about, he started his podcast because he used to be bullied in high school, and he ate his lunch in a bathroom stall because he didn't want to get beat up. And so he started talking to his phone, and now the guy's, shredded and has 33 million followers and an 8-figure net worth. And, and so that's, what Ryan's, so he talks to those people about, how their failures really provided the motivations and seeds of their success. So, and Ryan certainly knows that, because he's made $1 billion and lost $2 billion,
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that the stories that a lot of the producers out of Hollywood have with podcasting is interesting, and I think that's kind of what I wanted to dive into. Is that there's a lot of people in Hollywood like yourself, and I think I've definitely got the impression that you like to innovate, push the envelope on things, and try things, and oftentimes, or more often than not, you're successful with what you're doing. And so there's definitely some lessons that can be learned from that in the broader context of the podcasting industry, and how others might be able to approach this that might work. I don't so I don't know where you want to start on that.
You could have a real estate podcast in Sandusky, Ohio, or a podcast about the best pizza in Boston, right?
Yeah.
The principles that I apply that are working very successfully for me are no different there, right? And if you say to yourself, well, I don't know what to do, or I don't have the money, or what kind of microphone do I buy, or I don't know anything about marketing, then your job is not to buy it, but your job is to partner with people who understand it, because you're going to get so much more from a partner than someone you buy it from. And I can tell you this: if you think you have a great idea and you can't sell a partner on it, it's probably not such a great idea, I think. So, and by the way, prove me wrong. And I love saying I'm wrong, and my ex-wife will agree with you.
So I think that one of the things that a lot of creators out there, especially ones that are using StreamYard, and there's exceptions to this, but they tend to be solo creators, right? They're maybe have a buddy of theirs that they're doing a show with, or co-host, or they're a company that's trying to do a branded show, or things like that. And oftentimes the kind of productions that you're working on usually have a production team around them, and very, very talented, folks that are in your content. So how would you recommend to an independent creator, or just a team of two?
If you're going to,
do they need to think about?
I gotcha. If you're going to play music in your garage, be a great songwriter, right? So if you're going to do a solo cast, and you're going to provide the bare minimum in production value, which is fine, you better be an expert storyteller. You better answer questions your audience wants answered. You better have an experience that leaves people feeling something. It's interesting. I was shooting a podcast not too long ago with a highly respected producer, the guy who did Rain Man and many other fine films. And he had Trayvon Free, who was an Oscar-winning short film maker, a director. And he said the most important thing for him in filmmaking is not the story, but how people feel about his character, because they stop paying attention, they forget the story point, but at the end of the film, that character made them feel something. And I think the most important thing for the independent creator is to leave your audience feeling something. If you're not doing that, you're certain. If it's a sense of curiosity, I got to try that restaurant. If it's, I don't agree with your political opinions, you're a bastard and you have no right to live. It doesn't matter. You have to leave your audience feeling something. That's how you're going to make listen, you go to a restaurant and the food is delicious and you get shitty service. You say, I'm not going back there. You don't remember that the food was delicious. You do, but you think, what a shame, because those are assholes. I'm not going back.
It depends on what you're remembering about the experience.
Exactly. So your first, your first thing is, how do you make your audience feel really? And then, listen, it's like anything else, a certain amount of discipline is involved. I tell everyone, if you want to get into podcast, you gotta dedicate yourself to a season. You can't say, I'm going to try one and see if it works. And what do people think? I'm going to ask 5 people. You'll hear 5 opinions. You'll never get it done, right? You get a season done and you gain an audience and you get some numbers. By the time you hit the end of your season, you will learn so much about producing your show and editing story. And I wish I had done this. And I guarantee you, anyone who commits to a season and has that, it's like going to the gym. I guarantee you, if you do a proper program at the gym for 12 weeks, you will see a difference in your body that every diet wishes they could sell you. Right. And everyone knows that, but no one has the discipline to do it. Podcast is the same. Do a season of your show, 12 episodes, 24 episodes. I guarantee you'll see results at the end of that season.
Yeah. And at the very least, you're going to learn a lot from it too. I mean, I advise creators to, not create a bunch of episodes in advance. Just start with your first, get to your second, get to your third. And what you'll find is you'll learn along the way, right? You'll learn your preferences. You'll learn a little bit. Hopefully you'll get some feedback from your audience and you can refine and improve. And that's what I'm trying to do with this show too, is I'm trying to make it better every time I do it. And better is a subjective decision, right? And
no, that's judged by your downloads and listeners. It can be easily seen in your RSS feed what you're getting, and in your YouTube counts. Really, that's that's your barometer, unless it's much more altruistic.
Yeah, and I think, well,
I want to disagree with you. And by the way, we can have different opinions and both be right.
Yeah, totally.
I think if you're going to launch your podcast, you should have 3 episodes, right?
Okay.
I think you launch with 3, not only for your metrics. Hey, why am I in the charts? And why don't I have more downloads? And why aren't I making, well, the more downloads you have in a small period of time are going to affect your ranking more than a lot of downloads over a long period of time. So if someone likes your show, hey, I love Rob's show, I want to listen to another one, and listen again, you have something that if you just launched with one show, you don't have, right? So you have an opportunity to push your optics. You have an opportunity for your SEO if you launch with 3 shows versus 1 show. And also it just shows a level of commitment on your part to doing your show.
Yeah.
I mean, I know many people who don't, who don't watch any TV or streaming, programs until they at least have a season on the air, because they don't want their time wasted. They don't want 3 episodes an hour or anything like that. So.
Yeah, I would say that my only pushback on that too is the concept is that, if you produce 3 episodes in one sitting and you're just getting started, maybe you're going to produce 3 episodes, and sometimes you'll publish one of them, but you won't publish the other 3 because you want to redo them because they're not up to your perceived standard.
They don't have to be in one sitting. It's funny. Right. Maybe we're talking about 2 different kinds of shows. But I think, when you go live, you have your feed and you're going to put your stuff in, YouTube or Buzzsprout or wherever you're going to launch your show, right? If when I get paid to consult for people, or if a friend asks me, I would say, do not launch with a single show. Launch with more than 1 show if you're serious about getting noticed, because it's simple math. The way the metrics work, why is this show on the Apple charts and that one's not? Why is this famous person down there and this shit I've never heard of is up top? It's a very simple matter of mathematics, and your ranking is different than your downloads. So you can have a number 1 show with shitty downloads. You can have a show that has tons of downloads and you don't see on the charts at all. And some people conflate those 2. They're 2 completely different things.
Yeah. I like the comment here that was it a uni T gave us here. Thanks so much for this. I avoided starting for years out of fear, but I decided to develop consistently in 2024. So congratulations. I think that's a good choice. So I think, Jack, we're both kind of the same thought on that topic, from the standpoint of there is an advantage to having multiple episodes in your feed, for the simple reason that we are in a binging generation, right? Just look at the ideology of Netflix, right? Netflix produces all their episodes in advance and they publish them all at the same time. Oftentimes, right?
What if someone has 1 job on their resume? What if someone has 1 picture on their Instagram profile?
That's right.
It doesn't mean anything about that person, but what you think about them, you make a judgment based on that. So,
right.
I think it just shows a level of commitment. And even as a producer of content, you'll learn a lot by having 3 episodes live. Like you said, what if you want to make a change? I agree with you. By the time you get to episode 3, you're going to say, I'm going to go back and shoot a new intro for episode 1. Right.
Yeah. Which you can still do.
As you know, when you get to episode 100, you think, oh my God, I wish I could go back and do those other shows. But that's like looking at baby pictures. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with it, but you've learned so much. And, but I just think as a content creator, and if you're just a tactician, if it's podcast tips, launch with multiple episodes, because it's a good hack for chart position. If you're going to do anything to promote your show, you're wasting your time. If you're promoting a single episode, don't waste your time.
Yeah, I think that I think both of us are right. I think it depends on the content.
I agree with Norma. I agree with you,
Right.
Norma. I agree with you. And Norma, you can DM me or whatever. And if you have a question about launching your show, I'm happy to play through. But you're doing all that work, right? It's like, let's say you do a bodybuilding competition and you finally get yourself in shape you've always wanted to get into, and you do the competition and you don't take 1 picture. Well, what a wasted opportunity. And I think, launching your show is very much the same way. And just with a little smart thinking and no more work, you can get so much further. You just want to work smart, not hard, because the hard work is ahead of you. It's not right now.
Yeah, and it's easy to replace an episode too. So if for some reason you do publish it and you kind of regret publishing it, you can always kind of make some
I've done that. I've done
changes,
that. Yeah.
right, and then replace the file up on the server. Now with YouTube, it's a little more challenging to do that. You can't. I mean, you can edit on YouTube, but you can't update a file. So you have to, that's a different platform. We're talking about podcasting. So
Yeah.
if you make a mistake with something and you missed it or something like that in the third episode of your launch, you can always update it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so that's possible. So I do agree with you, Jack, that I think that there is an advantage there because your audience comes to that feed or comes to the instance in Apple Podcasts and sees 3 episodes, and they're like, well, maybe they don't connect with the first episode, but they connect with the second one, right? And they try the second one. That probably opens up an opportunity which may have been missed, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, you have better optics for your sponsors. As I said, if you're reviewing restaurants, having a few episodes to rock might get you a sponsorship locally or nationally where a single episode won't. You're welcome, Norma.
Yeah. Thank you. And say leaving Scientology. I don't know if this is a topic about Scientology, but say I haven't figured out the virtual cable for sound, but the StreamYard end of that is easy. It says here the OBS part is a bit tricky. So I have been using StreamYard audio selection, just my microphone. So I think, trying to utilize OBS with StreamYard, I think you can do it, but it might be better to just use one tool than probably trying to use 2. Just my own advice. I don't know that there's a lot of things that OBS can do that StreamYard can't do in most situations, but if you're successfully doing that, and the virtual cable thing is, I'm not sure if that's an audio thing or if you're talking about the video side on the virtual cable part. But
Hey, I have some StreamYard audio spec questions. I don't know how well you're in with their technical specifications, but what are the limits of their audio streaming? Let's say I had a live event. I was shooting a concert. We're in the studio recording a record, and I want to stream something in surround sound. I want to stream something in Dolby Atmos. I want to stream something in 5.1. Do you know what my ability is in the audio spec?
Yeah, it's not going to do any advanced codecs like that. We're basic just audio right now. But I think that's a good topic because I do believe that the technology is improving and that we will see support for things like that start to move across the industry.
This little Nomano device that you and I both have here, this little thing here, this box that I'm holding has 8 microphones in it. So in addition to these lavaliers here that give you, hey, you're on Bill Maher and you have a lavalier mic, and they have a little AI that makes it sound better than a lot of engineers do.
Yeah, right.
You have this box, which gives you the ability to have some level of surround sound, which is when they say ambisonic.
It's spatial audio is what
so you have a lot of 360 audio. And so as long as you have a device that's so portable, and by the way, StreamYard might actually support it. It just depends on this on the data spec of their streaming. If I have a binaural 2-channel file, right, that won't translate to an MP3 because the amount of screwing around with the file they do does not allow me to do that. But
on the export
in YouTube, I can have spatial audio, so I can have a bin WAV file,
right,
and I can have a black picture but surround sound audio on YouTube. So I'm just curious, if this streaming platform handles it, I think it'd be really great for podcasts that have live music events or music coverage, things like that. Be interesting.
Yeah, I think that those Dolby Atmos platforms and things like that are coming to podcasting pretty fast. I know I was just down at Podfest down in Orlando, and they had outfitted a Tesla Model X.
I know. Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that. Yeah.
So it was an interesting experience. Those Model X cars have like 8 speakers in them, right? So you can create that kind of sound depth and sound.
Well, I'll tell you this interesting one, and I shouldn't hint at it because our deal is not done, but I like the product. we're talking to Lucid Autos, Lucid Automobile, who makes a competitor
Lucid, right?
to Tesla. They have a 21 microphone system. 21,
Microphone
I'm sorry, yeah, they have a
or
21
speakers?
speaker system. I'm sorry, they have a 21 speaker system in their car that is very immersive, and the materials they use and the acousticians who've been involved in the project are interesting, and so they're considering doing some podcast sponsorships. And I think it's the perfect forum to do it because what better place to do it than in an acoustically sound environment. You can control it. You know how your surround sound is going to be. You're driving to work. You're going here or there. You're on vacation, and you can enjoy an immersive audio experience. So, we've been talking to Lucid about possibly coming on board a project. So, but I hear you, and I hear you with the Dolby project too. Although, listen, I like the guys at Dolby. The individuals are nice. I'll tell you something about Dolby though, and I don't want to make enemies, but I do it organically. They are much more focused in the deal that they can make with Amazon about proprietary technology than making a surround sound experience available to the content creator. Hey, I'm a storyteller. I'm Tarantino. I'm Spike Lee. I want to tell a story. I'm Michael Moore. I want to uncover something, right? I could have it immersive. Dolby is not so interested in you. I'm NBC Universal. They want to deal with you because they want proprietary technology in place. And it's fine. It's good technology, but I don't like thinking that they're going with capital over content. That seems to be Dolby's focus because, they're always at these events, but they pay little attention to the content creators other than when it shoots their short-term interest. But their product is great, but their inclusion in the community is horrible because they're not interested in the content creator. They're not interested in the storyteller. They're interested in Netflix, right?
And the big deals, right?
Yeah, yes. And if the filmmaker said, this is the lens I must use, then the studio is going to use that goddamn lens. And I think for Dolby, their biggest marketing guffaw is that they are more interested in selling some big ticket deal to Amazon than getting the technology into the content creators' hands. Because if they got it, everyone would use it, and then everyone would be forced to adopt it. It's like Costco with organic food. They aren't incentivized to do it until every customer wants it. But
yeah, and that whole thing with Dolby too is it's such a proprietary algorithm that they have with their technology that they have to get these big listening platforms to support.
But it's not true. It's not true
Really?
because they have an algorithm for binaural audio that is. So if you have an Atmos file, their authoring tool will make you a 2-channel version like you would have for VR. That they wrote it for VR. But years ago in 2019, I was at Dolby Labs in Burbank, and again, lovely people, and I like many of you, and you're so smart. Your product is great. But they had no interest in. I said, hey, let's do a show. We were doing a show with many famous people, and I said, let's do it in binaural sound. Let's give them surround sound and headphones like they've never heard. And Dolby couldn't have been any less interested because they were more interested in selling proprietary technology to Amazon than they were giving an immersive experience to the audience. And the audience is where you're going to get it.
Yeah, and I think that there's kind of two ends of the spectrum here. There's these, like we're talking about with the Dolby Atmos stuff, but that's really kind of for a very specific type of content, right? It's not going to be generally used by podcasters, and that's one of the challenges with it. Where you look at something like a Nomano, or you look at even a newer platform called it's the InSounds platform. I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but it's another kind of noise reduction AI-based audio enhancement platform that allows people to record audio on their mobile phones and have it sound like you're in a studio. So there's this ability coming for podcasters to basically record on any type of recording device and have this technology, this new advanced AI-based
But as I said, it's not about the technology. You give Slash a guitar from a Goodwill, and it's going to sound great. Even if you don't like what he has to play, the guy can play. But so it really depends on the story you're telling.
Well, it's also the freedom of the podcaster, I think, is the end of the day of where they can record.
Well, that's the nice thing is unplugging you from the studio is the greatest thing.
That's exactly the bigger point, right? It's being able to have a simple recording setup that you can bring to a conference, or you can bring to a conference room, or you can bring to a lobby in a hotel, sit down with somebody and have a conversation and record.
You can busk in the New York subways.
Yeah.
I can take my guitar, I can put my hat out, and I can go play anywhere. And so I
Right.
think it's very much the podcast version, and you hope to be heard.
I don't know, record a podcast on a bus or something like that, right?
I think Romano did that. I think I got to talk to
Yeah.
those guys.
Well,
They did
actually, I think they made a video
train something. I
of
think maybe it was a train. They were doing a fashion show
or in
on
a
a
car
train.
with all the windows rolled down was the other
Yeah,
one that they did, right? Or in front of a waterfall.
yeah,
That's the other thing too, and it'll take out all that background sound because of the ambient sound that it captures by that little box that you held up.
yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of a technology discussion, but it I am very focused on it. I mean, I do have a partnership with the InSounds platform, and it is kind of moving towards basically enabling content creators to record their podcast anywhere with any device, and
I
that's
want to try it. I have some nuisance audio I would love to upload and see what
nuisance audio.
I do. I haven't listened. Everyone deals with it. Sometimes you get some, a gem, and it's just like a blurry picture.
Yeah,
By the way,
exactly. I mean, if
by the
you
way,
can clean it up.
talking about blurry picture, Norma said something about her 480p picture. Listen, there's a lot of AI upconvert technology now. So if you're worried you have some shitty video from 15 years ago,
It'll clean it up, right?
I'm not going to endorse any particular platform, but there's a lot of places you can go to respectably upconvert your content. So if you're worried that it's unusable, that might not necessarily be the case.
Yeah, definitely. And looks like the comment that we have up here, the Unity, right? I tried using OBS. Sorry, I stunk it up so bad that I had to reinstall my Microsoft because it messed up my audio or something like that. So, and yeah, it sounds like you didn't have the best of experience with OBS. So that's where StreamYard could probably really help you. It would be kind of eliminating that complexity. So it seems appropriate that you're here with us tonight. So,
and what's your show? I want to know what people's shows are about. I mean, I know
share with us.
I'm always interested.
Your podcast.
What are we trying to get off the?
Yeah, and I'll pull it up on the screen if you want to share as well. So it'd be awesome. So, and I wanted to talk with you too a little bit, Jack, about how do you think just an everyday podcaster needs to think about storytelling, and what's the key to that, do you think, in a conversation? So do conversations need to be structured, or do they can they be a good story if they're not structured?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, different people are different. Some people are more pensive and they need to think things over, and some people are better off the cuff. It's important to understand what kind of storyteller you are, but you want to be curious. You want to be curious. Some people are more interested. When I came to LA, my sister said, "I'm going to give you some advice. You'll be just fine." People like to talk about themselves. If you get them to talk about themselves, they'll like you, right? And I think the same thing in podcasts. But a lot of people who host a show are more interested in them than their topic or their guest. And so I think that you want to be curious. You want to ask questions your audience wants answered. You really want to put yourself in other people's shoes and add some value. And as I said, if you're not adding value, you want to make someone feel something, whether it's excitement or hatred, they have to walk away feeling something. And the other thing is, there's a lot of noise out there. So if you're going to have a solo cast or just, two people talking to a microphone about restaurants or movies or whatever, or politics, or just playing video games, there's a lot of noise. So if you want to be heard above the noise, you're going to have to offer something that your competitors do not. And I think still in podcasts, there are massive, massive opportunities to be heard above the noise. Massive. Look, I mean, this is my first show. It's been on the charts for 41 weeks, right? There's no reason I should have a show on the charts against Marvel and iHeart and Spotify and Universal, Lionsgate, and Sony and every other. Why? I think it's easy to be heard above the noise, and all you have to do is do a little better than your competitors, which, I have to tell you, listen, there's many fine shows out there, but many of your competitors are setting the bar very low. Let's just be honest.
Yeah. So if you don't have, let's say a celebrity like a Kelsey Grammer, which is part of your...
We didn't, listen, when we launched Table Read, we had no celebrities. We had no celebrities at all.
What's the magic there, Jack, that
here's what we did.
Taps into success?
Great. So Table Read, here's the story behind Table Read, right? My friend Sean Sharma, who's on the show The Chosen, which has nothing to do with our success, and he's very active with the Screen Actors Guild. In my community, he does these table reads in Hollywood where writers, or directors might want to have a script read before they decide if they're going to come on board, or where they want to hear actors do it live. So behind the scenes, doesn't matter if it's Spielberg or Universal or J.J. Abrams or whomever, people have table reads done to see if they like these scripts. And so Sean puts them on for AFI and Screen Actors Guild and different. And so, he said to me, hey, I've done 600 table reads in the last 3 years. And he said, there's some scripts that were so incredible that moved everyone in the room, and they haven't made them into features. And I said, well, let's do them as a podcast, right? If they had, if people cried or they laughed or whatever, the room couldn't handle it. It's, it's Bridesmaids, but no one's ever heard it, and in our community, we knew actors, but we didn't know super famous actors. Hey, this guy's been a cadaver on CSI. This guy played an alien on one show.
This guy's been a cadaver on CSI.
I'm not even joking. So many of my
Claim
friends,
to fame.
They were a lawyer in 3 episodes of a
Right.
David E. Kelly show, right? So they're working actors. So we said, hey, let's take this script that's won a Blacklist award, that's been covered on Coverfly, that no studio's ever bought, but everyone says it's so goddamn good, and let's just do it live in a table read with actors who love to act. And we called the actors community, right? And there's many people who do independent films and local theater because they love the craft, not because they're looking for money or stardom. And the actors community said, yeah, we want to read these award-winning scripts. And we just set up mics and presented as a podcast. So it was very organic. We didn't have any celebrities. And then once we showed proof of concept, I sent it out to celebrities, and I sent it to showrunners. And they listened to the first one we did, which was Renfair versus Aliens by Harry Aspinwall, who's an award-winning writer who has not had his big break yet, but when he enters writers' competitions, he wins awards. And by the way, Harry, yes, you had your big break, but I still think your greatest achievement is ahead of you. But and that's what we do. And so the celebrity came later. It's almost like the hot ones. Right. That guy started eating hot peppers with anyone he could get, and then it became something to do. Right. And then it became very respectable. The same thing with us. We put on a very respectable show, and the talent followed. And I think this, if you add value, if you do something no one else is doing, you're going to get heard above the noise, because everyone is doing the same thing. And if all you do is get in the big line to get into a nightclub, you're probably never going to get in. And it's the same thing. If you only do what everyone else is doing, you're never going to be heard.
So how do you think the podcasters should try and differentiate themselves? I mean, what are those key factors? I know that a lot of the common thinking is like the host's presence. What is the host? I think about a lot of the big kind of video shows on YouTube that are also podcasts, and they look like a podcast and stuff like that. What differentiates, do you think, those shows that are getting 500,000 views and shows that are only getting 2 or 3 views?
Listen, your show, podcast, YouTube show, TV show is going to live or die by your host. Okay. People watch Jimmy Fallon for Jimmy, not for Schwarzenegger, who's on.
Got it. Right? It's not about the guest, right?
It is not all about the guest. It is about the host 100%. And your show will live or die by your host. It doesn't matter who the fuck is on. If your host is bad and you have a Kardashian on, you're still not going to have a show that survives. You're just really not. So, and the host doesn't have to be famous, right? Look at Ear Hustle. Here's a prisoner who hosted a show about being on the inside, but his voice was genuine, right? And so that's where you get some skin in the game. And it's no different than, someone who hosts a true crime show because their family was devastated by true crime, and they then decide, I'm going to do this show where I'm going to track down criminals. They have skin in the game. And so you don't have to be famous. As a matter of fact, I don't like the, Robert Stack Unsolved Mysteries, model where you have a celebrity who comes in and squawks some lines. I think podcast is genuine. So if the host has skin in the game, they're going to ask the questions. They're going to relate to the audience. They're going to relate to the audience. They're going to relate to the guest. Listen, a friend of mine pitched me a show that was really great with really great guests and hosts who I thought were not the right fit. That's the most political I can be. And I said, I can give you advice, but I'm not interested in coming on board because I don't think your hosts are the right fit. So, and many people who have an idea, they think, listen, they should be a producer, but they should back up as the host. Everyone wants to be the host. I should host a show. If you have a great idea, that is a skill, man. Being able to manage a show and ask the right questions and pace it out right and be intuitive and be humble and let other people talk, which I don't do, is really a gift.
And also, I think it's an underappreciated thing that you need to do is listen. And it's difficult sometimes doing a live show like this or other podcasts where you're so distracted doing other things that it's hard to multitask. So that takes a little bit of skill development to do that. I mean, I came out of broadcast radio for many years myself, but then I moved into doing pre-production for a lot of the content that I did. But I've been doing live for like 13 or 14 years. So, it does take some practice, to be able to manage a live show specifically takes practice, but it also takes a certain different level of energy too, that you need to bring to the production too. I struggle sometimes with the pre-recorded stuff now because it's like, I can always redo it, right? I can always re-record that, or I can always fix that, or whatever, and it kind of lowers your energy level, I think. I don't know. What's your thought on live versus pre-recorded?
Listen, it's no different than music. Some acts are incredible live. They put on a show and they leave it all on the stage. And some
Right.
people are like, Steely Dan or Pharrell or, whatever reference you want to use, where in the studio you can get it just perfect. So personally, as someone who likes to fix my mistakes, I like studio work where you can get it just perfect.
Just perfect, right?
Exactly. But there's some people who are so good live, and I'm not one of them, where they can really thrive in that environment. And some people really are energized by an audience. Some people
Yeah.
connect with a live audience in a way that is a very unique experience. And I can only tell you, as a musician who wasn't good enough, I always like studio work better than live work. And the guys who weren't good enough always like live work better than studio work, because they could organically, in that moment, there's an energy between your audience when you do live work. It's no different than a comedian who does something in front of an audience versus pre-recorded.
So I think that there's strengths. It really gets back to what your skills are as a content creator, right? And
100%.
what you feel comfortable with, and it's okay to make some mistakes. I mean, I'm not perfect when I produce this show either. There's always little things that don't work quite right, but I think the audience is okay with that generally, as long as I'm thinking about them and looking at their comments and involved in trying to have a conversation with you that's helpful to them. And I think I try and do that. I'm not perfect at it.
Hey, I want to know about the interviews with celebs, but like two levels below Joe Rogan. So Square Table, tell me
what is 2 levels below Joe Rogan?
I might know some of those people. They might be my friends. I want to know who they are. I'm going to help you. DM me. I want to hear who they are, because
I've got a couple of friends that I know that have been on Joe's show. So it's not easy to get on his show.
By the way, I'll tell you this about live versus studio. There's many shows that start in the studio and then go on tour and do a live show. And even with Table Read, where we go into a studio and really record the best one, we're talking about doing a live one, a live reading of Fright Night with the original cast in front of an audience. So even though with, Christopher Sarandon and all the original people, and it's a real cult classic, but so even though we normally do them in a studio, because we're going to read something that has a core audience, we thought, let's bring, Tom Holland, who's the original director who created Chucky, and the original cast back together, 40 years later, and let's do this live table read in front of an audience in an auditorium. So even though our show is typically a studio show, we are going to do one live and then have a Q&A after and a little get together. So I think you can do a hybrid.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we're getting close to the end of the show here, and I just want to remind you that the giveaway is going to happen at the end of the show. Just enter the hashtag the yard into your comment field as you're watching this live show, and that'll enter you into the giveaway that's going on here. And let me look and see how many folks are entered. We're up to, looks like 42 entries. So if you haven't entered to win a StreamYard hoodie, sweatshirt, and a Puddles the Duck, please enter your entry into the comment field. So anyway, yeah. And Jack, I wanted to, there's aspects of this that are the whole creating an unforgettable podcast, right? There's different dynamics that happen with pre-recorded versus live. Now, live, I think, has greater opportunities to create an unforgettable experience. I think the pre-production side has different opportunities. Can you talk about that? So as you think about a pre-produced opportunity, what does that look like if you're really trying to wow an audience and really build an audience that's loyal to the program and will keep coming back?
Well, as I said, you want to make your audience feel something, but I think the difference in podcast is where TV is very one way, and even where radio is very
Right.
one way. Podcast people feel like they know the host and they're part of the show and they're
Right.
in the experience. It's like, listen, if you go to see a comedian live, I could name anyone, but it doesn't matter if, you think of any famous comedian, you feel like you know the comedian because you've gone out and it's an experience in the room and you're sharing it with them. So that's a live experience. A pre-recorded show is much more of a planned, calculated event. And as I said, different people are good different ways, and different stories unfold different ways. In a live show, you have, the element of surprise and unpredictability, and you can build that into your show. And as I said, some people are good off the cuff. And, in a pre-recorded show, you have, a lot of opportunity for not only sound, but, storytelling edits. But, I think some people really like those 3-hour unedited shows. And then in storytelling, some people like very refined shows where, they're hearing a story the way the very best authors have given it to them, and the way listen, look at Dr. Death on Wondery, right? People who really love fine documentary filmmaking, Oscar-winning documentary filmmaking, or A&E biography, connect with that. And it's a very journalistic approach to podcast. So it really depends what direction you're going to go. And like us, we're really having fun in the fiction, a realm. We're doing a show with best-selling author Brenda Jackson. She's written 150 novels. So we're trying to bring her audience who has bought literally millions of novels, who's put her on the bestsellers list, 7 times a year. Those are people who buy novels, and we're trying to bring them into the podcast realm. So, much like Brenda's book is refined and edited and rewritten, our show is edited and refined and rewritten for an audience who's used to that kind of distilled content. But some people like to eat the vegetables raw out of the garden, and some people like the wine that's a little more distilled.
So would you recommend that just about everybody go take an improv class or a comedy class of some sort?
Listen, I think
can
both
that be taught? Can that skill be taught?
Well, listen, it can't be taught, but you can uncover if the raw materials are there. A buddy of mine who went to film school, and he was a documentary filmmaker. They had an assignment as these film school SC filmmakers, and the assignment was to go out and do interviews with people, but to get them upset and then calm them down, and to see how many times you could keep talking to them before they would walk away. Right. And so how many times, and I thought, that's a skill that you need to learn, to when you're managing situations. And I think that's a huge skill. So, I think developing, as you said, the ability to improv or the ability to interview is you got to get out there and do it. And I like that one because that's very trial by fire. If your goal is to get, because listen, if you're going to get people as an interviewer, you got to be able to ask hard questions that people don't want to answer.
And there's organizations out there. I'm trying to remember the name of it too, that you can learn how to public speak and things like that. So I think podcasting is a lot different than public speaking, though. I think there's a lot of
speak more candidly like you do to a friend, and I think being a great orator is a much different skill set than exchanging genuine dialogue. And I think the hardest thing is many people will speak with a friend in one way, but they can't speak to an audience the same. There's a disconnect. You feel vulnerable. Like I could be naked in the shower, but not out shopping, right? You're comfortable it's the same thing, but it's just a different perspective. And I think, being that same genuine, and some people just aren't that way, but if you can be that same vulnerable, inquisitive person, I think you can be very successful live. If not, I think it might take a little more sculpting like what I do.
Well, I think it's something you have to think about too, because you don't want to do things that are unnatural to you and to your personality. It's not going to get.
You're right, April. You're right, April. The person is the story, April, but also you're the story, your perspective, your lens. Your job, April, is if you're telling a story, you're like a magnifying glass with the sun. So this person you're interviewing is that light coming in. It's your job to condense that story down to the very best elements, because otherwise, the audience doesn't have a dog sniffer. They're not going to get the story. You have the dog sniffer. So it's your job to make that, evident to them. So I get you. 100% is the person. If you don't care about people, you shouldn't have a podcast. Or if you don't care about people, you should find a different host, I would say.
Right. Well, and also the aspect of sharing personal aspects of yourself I do know that there are some very big radio podcast hosts out there that, if you listen to their programs, they actually get very kind of personal with their audience, right?
Yeah.
And share things about their to some degree about their wives or their hobbies and the things that they work on. And there's always been this tension in the medium that you should never get too personal with your audience, or you should never share.
That's where you find listeners. That's where you find engagement.
And
right?
connection,
You're going to talk about
right?
the fact that, hey, Nigel Lithgow discussed on Ryan's podcast that he attempted suicide. So many people are going to listen and say, I went through that same experience, and they feel very validated by it, right? So that's an opportunity for you to end up with some audience engagement, which is an opportunity for you to engage in writing with your audience, which is an opportunity for you to up your SEO. So when people search things, your show comes up. And, the other thing is, a lot of people say, well, I have a great show. I'm asking questions, but how do I find, how's anyone going to come listen? How are they going to know about me? How are they going to know me?
Yeah, how do we get the word out to reach people?
I can tell you what we did for table read.
Right.
Listen, here's what we did. Outside of having a lot of cast members so we could use a greater social media echo, let's say you don't have that. I have 2 people. We were aggressive in submitting our show for awards consideration and festival consideration. And, because we were making such a high caliber show, many very good awards accepted us. And what that did was that put us in consideration for an award win along with other respectable shows. And suddenly our show is in with these iHeart shows and these Wondery shows. And then there's our show. And we were very aggressive about submitting them because it put us next to names that we wanted to be next to, that we felt maybe we were as good as. And that created a much larger echo for us, because we couldn't afford a PR firm. We couldn't afford a billboard on Sunset like Amazon, but we can certainly get our name right next to Amazon. And in many awards, we won against Amazon. And again, that was very validating. And that takes nothing more than someone going to many of the exploitive sites that have contests and giveaways and submitting your show and getting objectively recognized, because you say, well, how can I be heard above the noise? If you're making something really great, submit it for as much consideration as you can. And if you're telling a really important message, I would say go to an important foundation and get a grant for the work you're doing. If you're talking about food or homelessness or anything that's a little more altruistic, get a grant and produce your show. And if you're a great storyteller, submit to competitions, because you're going to find yourself competing with Wondery and iHeart and Spotify in short order. And, that's what we've done. We've won competition after competition against them, even though we can't afford to advertise against them.
So did you ever enter any of your shows into the Ambies Awards?
Yeah, I have. Let's see here.
Did you win one? Is it?
I have a Webby nomination. I have an Emmy.
Webby. Okay.
So this year we've won. Table Read has won 8 awards so far and been nominated 22 times, and we've won. So, but the Ambies are coming up and the Webbies are
right
coming
here
up,
in March.
So
I was the first chairperson of the Ambie Awards. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, well, it's nice to know. My uncle Alvin said, what makes it, you're a good lawyer. If you win the case, you're a great lawyer if you know the judge. And I think in entertainment. But as I said, even if you're I can tell you this, as an unknown show that didn't have any studio cred, we put ourselves in for recognition and we got it. And at one point we were up for many festival selections at the same time. And that pushed our downloads to almost 80,000 downloads a week. Wow. Maybe 6 or 8 weeks into us launching our podcast. And, if I listen to the people who are subject, have reasonable expectations for your podcast and, have a newsletter, here are the 5
big
things.
Numbers. Right.
Here are the 5 things you should do. That's bullshit advice, really, because, everyone's strategy is a tailor-made suit. And you have to think, what can you do? But I think that's a soft underbelly, is get those awards and get those recognitions, because just like A&R guys who used to sign bands, they look at who's hot in Buffalo and who's hot in Seattle, and then they go check out the acts. So if you start making a place for yourself on, small film festival scenes that have a podcast category or small podcast competitions, people watch that at the larger platforms. And if you make enough half-court shots, someone is going to call you. That's what happened with Realm. Listen, the best way to sell is to have people come to you, not you go to them.
Yeah, right. I agree with that 100%.
Realm came to us. We got 1 million downloads before we got any advertisers. Then advertisers started coming, and organically we approached sponsors like Nomano. They're kick-ass. We said, let's do a whole show just with your mics. And they came on board as sponsors, both in providing equipment, and they helped them some production costs. And they're
good.
Awesome. And when we got to 1 million downloads, then advertisers started coming on. And then, by the end of the year, Realm reached out and they said, hey, we like what you're doing. We want you to join the network. So, and as I said, that's the best way to sell is when people are knocking on your door, because cold calling sucks.
Yes, I wanted to mention this comment. It's a very interesting comment, especially as you think about broadcast radio. But the Basement Show made a comment here. It said, my show has 5 different shows in it. One is all sports. We have a ladies' night show and a video game show and a movie night. So this concept of it's kind of like a variety show, right? It's rather old school.
Well, listen, I don't know if it's 5 shows in one or if they're a production umbrella that is presenting 5 separate programs.
Yeah, I would think that it just covers all those.
By the way, I love the idea of a variety show and podcast at the platform level. Like, for a while I was, working for Universal and working for the studios. And I remember several times saying, hey, there should be a variety show. No one's doing it with Thrive and Podcast. So if that's what they're doing, great. And if they're trying to think, what do we do with our 5 shows, 5 different shows under one umbrella?
I don't know that it's 5 different show feeds. It could be one show.
But I'll tell you what to do. If you
DM
me, seriously, I promise I will tell you exactly what to do. I have a good friend who's a sports agent at a major agency. I have good friends in the NFL, and listen, it doesn't matter if it's, 30 for 30 or, Barstool Sports, it's a huge showing. As far as ladies' night go, more women support podcasts than men. Each one of those, has an angle where you can easily find an audience and find a sponsor to help you bring it to an audience.
Yeah. I mean, clearly, women are taking over podcasting.
Everything really.
Yeah.
And listen, having managed creative teams, I always find that when I'm looking for the best, we always end up, female heavy as far as people can get the job done and are organized and, make no excuses. I can just tell you how it has worked out repeatedly when we're only looking for the best and not looking at gender.
Yeah, right. I mean, really, talent comes from everywhere out there, and sometimes it comes from very surprising places. But there's also a very diverse audience out there in podcasting now, which hasn't always been the case.
Well, here's where it really thrives, right? Even though on a very tight vertical, and a vertical is your audience, it doesn't matter if it's Republican politics or MAGA people or someone in an extreme vertical, turkey hunting, right? Podcast, if you have a very extreme vertical, can thrive because your audience will be interesting to an advertiser. If I have a turkey hunting podcast and I have 5,000 weekly listeners, someone who's marketing a travel experience to Turkey, I think the only reason I use that is because there's a podcast with like 12,000 followers of the turkey hunting podcast. And the guy does very well because someone who sells anything specific knows that every listener is a customer. Right.
Sponsored by Butterball, right?
Listen, if you're selling turkey vines or whatever, I'm not endorsing turkey hunting. I'm just saying that, you can exist on a very tight vertical. If you're going to say, the best, pizzerias on the east side of New York, right? You can certainly have a podcast that makes money and is funded and thrives in a very tight vertical. You don't need to be smartless and have $100 million deal on XM, but it's nice to know that you can achieve those goals.
Yeah. And this other comment, was it Split Rock? My podcast is a group chat. The central topic, and 4 to 6 people discuss their views on certain hobby issues. There's many laughs and jokes as well. StreamYard is working out for him pretty well for that type of a format. It's an interesting format, right? It's like it's like a group show on radio, like a morning show, that kind of concept.
Listen, I like all those open discussions. If it's Pod Save America or Drink Champs or whatever it is, I like those open discussion forums. And, everyone likes the barbershop conversation or people hanging around playing video games.
Yeah, especially if the people have personalities and they're different and they don't always agree. And there's just a magic formula to this. I mean, I've done shows that had as many as 3 other co-hosts. And there's a formula. I mean, it's an X factor. You never know when the formula is going to line up and be blockbuster. but sometimes you luck out, right? And it all works, and the magic flows. But
Listen, the
it
most
is
important thing
hard
is
to be
when
creative.
the magic does flow, being prepared for it.
Well,
Right.
yeah.
That's what, when that opportunity presents itself and you have something that's getting a little fire, you have a platform that's interested, or you have an investor has some money, you have that advertiser coming at you for the first time, the most important thing is for you to be able to, recreate the magic every time, not just getting it right one time to attract someone, but to continue. It's like you go to In-N-Out every time the burger is good. Right.
Right.
And so you want to make sure that not only is it the person that you attracted them the first time, but every time they come, they're getting what they're looking for.
Right. And that can vary a little bit, and it can be appealing to different segments of the audience too. It's just, are you going to keep the same audience coming back if it's a different formula? Because people, that's the advantage of like a multi-person show, is like, more than one and more than two, is that certain people will be attracted to certain co-hosts and maybe not like other co-hosts, but the dynamic between the person that you like and the person maybe you don't like
Mhm.
is what keeps you coming back, right? So
Absolutely.
those are kind of X factors that are sometimes hard to predict. But my recommendation for this is always, if you have a co-host or whatever, it's always ideal to have them be a completely different personality than you.
Listen, it's true. In
Right,
screenwriting, your
right,
story thrives on conflict, right?
right,
Anybody, if you're taking one of those 101 level, or I went to this film school and I studied writing, at the most remedial level, conflict is where your story thrives, and that's where your audience will, relate to your story. So I agree. The more conflict you can interject into your storytelling, the more your audience will relate to it.
yeah. Well, I think we should probably move towards wrapping this up and getting the giveaway going. I think we're approaching 90 minutes here, Jack. We've definitely outstretched our welcome, but it does appear that our live viewers have stayed up pretty high as we move toward the 90-minute mark, which is
But
good to see, right? So that's always a good gauge on this. And the comments have been coming through, and I want to thank everybody for posting the comment. I don't always make it through all the comments, so because there's so many that come in, and I totally appreciate it. And I try and get through as many of them as I can. But let's go ahead and pull up the giveaway, and let's see. I think we're up to 53 entries in the drawing, so that's a good number. I appreciate that, everybody. And so let's pull that up to the screen here. Let me change there. There's the screen. So last minute here, if you haven't entered the giveaway for the StreamYard hoodie and a Puddles duck, go ahead and type hashtag the yard into the drawing or into your comment field in your preferred live viewing platform, and that'll be added to the pool that we will do a random draw on here. So we will figure that out. So one thing I did want to mention too, just to catch everybody, just in case some folks leave here, is what you'll need to do if you turn out to be the winner is you'll need to send me an email with your sweatshirt size as well as your mailing address, so we can send you your swag. So let's go ahead and pull the draw, or push the draw button to figure out who of the 53 entries out there wants to get some swag. So let's hit the button right now. All right. Arius and the Nation won the giveaway tonight. Thank
that's
you
who
so
I was
much.
rooting for. I was
Oh,
rooting
it
for.
was. Awesome. Do you know him or something?
Oh, listen, I know them all. I know every one of these people.
Awesome. All right. So send me your email to rob.greenlee@gmail.com, and be happy to forward that email over to the StreamYard team, and we'll get you your swag out to you as soon as they can. So thank you so much. And Jack, I appreciate you so much for coming out and spending time with me today and taking up your evening to help others here. I appreciate that a lot. And I do wish you great success with the shows that you're working on. Feel free to share with your audience how the people that are watching this can keep up with you and see your projects and watch a few of your podcasts.
Got it. Thank you very much. Listen, it's been a pleasure. Anytime I can be of service, you let me know. And I think everyone should check out Table Read. They can go to manifestmediaproductions.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very accessible. And listen, the greatest thing about podcasts, as you know, because it's the way you and I came together, it is such a supportive community. If you're trying to get into film, if you're trying to get into radio, if you're trying to break into music, it's not as communal. And there's a lot of community support in podcasts where you can reach out to people and they'll help you get in. And that's one of my favorite things about it. It's kind of back to the, grassroots, just, I love making content versus, I'm overly competitive and, I'm not going to help you. So,
yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's the values of podcasting. That's how I came up. I mean, I started podcasting in 2004. And that was the values of the medium back then. It's continued to be that way. I just got back from a podcast conference. I was up on stage kind of managing the Podcast Hall of Fame down there. I had Dr. Drew Pensky as my master of ceremonies for the Hall of Fame induction ceremony that happened on the 26th down in Orlando. And so that was an exciting thing. So you can go watch that if you want in YouTube on the Lipson YouTube channel if you wanted to go check it out, or just do a search for Podcast Hall of Fame and you'll find it. So anyway, well, thank you, Jack, so much. This URL that I shared with everybody, if you want to see updated list of new features in the StreamYard platform, you can go to this URL, new.streamyard.com. And it has an itemized list of all of the new functions and features in the platform that will give you, compelling capabilities in the platform if you want to do a show, and it keeps you up to date. So that'd be a place that I would regularly go check to keep up to date with what's current in the platform. So anyway, well, thank you everybody for posting all the comments. I know I didn't get to everybody tonight, and I apologize for that. But come back and join me next week on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and would love to have you back with me on the program here. So it's always great to see all of you and have all of you, and a lot of the same names are showing up in the comment areas, and I fully appreciate that. So thank you so much, and hope you have a wonderful evening. Keep doing live and keep doing your podcast. It'll grow if you are consistent and keep it going. So thank you so much, Jack. Thanks again, and good night.